So we're in the prison hospital here at the moment. It's a very strange experience coming back after so many years. Coming in this morning, I had a strange sense that the electricity was off here today because of the lightning yesterday. And I had this strange experience coming in the main gate and finding the electricity off. It created a kind of an image for me that as we came in the main gate, not only was the electricity switched off, but it was as if the hostility had been switched off as well, because coming in now, there's the structure of the buildings, or what remains of the buildings. There's like an empty shell of what was here before. But when we came in as members of the Irish Commission for Justice and Peace in July of 1981, that structure was just filled with hostility and filled with the whole conflict. It was as if the whole Northern Ireland conflict had focused itself on this particular piece of ground and on these particular buildings. The buildings now look almost small and harmless. Even coming into the hospital just now, the small brick building, it looks so tiny now because it was exaggerated at the time because of the momentous things that were going on and the pain of what was going on and the hostility that was around it. Now it seems so empty and small and harmless. I think just behind me here is a little room which I think was a reception room in the hospital, and it has memories for me of being there with Tom McElwee's mother and sisters the day that Tom died, and the anguish that was in that little room. And again, the room was now just an empty shell. We would have come in connection with the Irish Commission for Justice and Peace. We would have come in the main entrance where we came in today, coming in to visit Tom McElwee as a cousin on a family visit. I would have come in the kind of public entrance. I'm intrigued. I don't know if this was the space. There aren't very many big spaces here in the hospital. I suspect it might even have been this space. But when we came with the Irish Commission for Justice and Peace to meet with all the hunger strikers, we met them in a space, a large space like this. It might even have been this space, although this is an entrance hall. The hunger strikers were lined up behind two Formica top tables, and each of the hunger strikers had a white or cream jug for water because they kept drinking water, and each of them also had a bowl to spit in. It was a very, very strange, surreal kind of experience. And the hunger strikers were lined along the two tables. The more recent hunger strikers were at the top end, and along the two tables, right down to Joe McDonnell, who was close to death, and he was in a wheelchair down at the bottom end of the tables. And straight across from me was my cousin Tom McElwee, and Bishop O'Mahony did a good deal of the speaking on our side of the table, and the hunger strikers would have responded then across the Formica top tables. And that's an image that has never left me, and I don't think will ever leave me. Just that image of all the hunger strikers there, from the more healthy, if you like, at the one end of the table down as far as Joe McDonnell on the other. And it was a strange experience. I can't really identify one room from another, but presumably this would have been a room with a bed. And I remember coming in when Tom Michael Wee was getting close to death. I remember visiting him, and he was in bed in a room like this. And he talked to me. He had an image which I thought was a very strong image. He talked about his favorite passage from the Gospels, which was the story of Jesus coming to the disciples in the storm, and he talked about being caught in a storm. The whole experience was like being caught in a storm, but he had this image that Jesus was coming across through the storm, walking on the water, and that he was reaching out to him. Now, I know that it would be very difficult for some people to even associate one of the hunger strikers of the whole history of the IRA struggle and so on with somebody who would have been thinking about the scriptures. But Tom Michael Wee came from a family with deep faith, and he would have had a deep faith himself. And however difficult that might be for some people to take on board, that faith was there at the time when he was close to death, and he felt himself out of control, I suppose, and caught in this storm, and depending on the faith with which he had been brought up, and reaching out to Jesus coming to him across the waters. I found that a very moving experience to listen to him. This is obviously the wards with the beds here. Yeah, again, it all looks so very small, and the whole surrounding atmosphere is so harmless now, but the atmosphere at the time was so intense. And everything happened under pressure, and the tension and the conflict was just funneled into these what appear now to be such small and harmless spaces, but they were full of tension at that time. I'm just remembering having visited the hunger strikers here. We were allowed. The hunger strikers were very dependent on Bick McFarlane, who was the prisoners' OC at the time. The authorities didn't want to acknowledge his position by allowing us formally to meet him. But they did agree, in the hope of finding some kind of resolution. They did agree that if Bick McFarlane requested individual members of the Irish Commission for Justice and Peace to meet with him, that we would be allowed a visit, an informal visit to him. So Bishop O'Mahony and myself and Hugh Logue received a request for a visit from Bick McFarlane. And we went to meet him, I presume, in one of the visitors' rooms. And while we went to meet him, the other two members of the delegation from the Justice and Peace Commission remained and prayed while we were there. One of the interesting things about the group is that it was a very prayerful group, because apart from the clergy members, all the members were prayerful people. Some of them were involved with prayer groups, and the whole effort, if you like, while we were meeting with Bick McFarlane, we were being surrounded by prayer from the other members of the group at the time. Brian Gallagher was the chairman of the Justice and Peace Commission at the time, and he was involved in a prayer group, and as I say, the whole group was a prayerful group of people, and that, in a sense, sustained us during the difficulties of of the discussions. Apart from the time when we came with the Justice and Peace Commission delegation, I would have visited Tom McElwee on a number of occasions on a personal basis as a cousin on a family visit. And I remember initially when I first came to visit with Tom, first of all, there was an extraordinary experience of hostility from the prison officers. I'm not suggesting all the prison officers, but certainly a significant number of prison officers would have spoken very loudly as I was making my way into the prison. They would have made their hostility very clear. They would have made, knowing that I was coming to visit Tom McElwee, they would have made nasty comments about Tom McElwee and about the prisoners in general. And I just had to kind of bite my lip and say nothing, because I was afraid I might not be allowed in if I raised any question marks. When I came into Tom then, I was initially concerned, wondering how he would respond to me. Our families had been quite close. My father and his father were very close first cousins, and I'd often, with my father, visited the family when Tom would have been growing up, when he was at school and so on, and there would have been a warmth there. When I came, I was wondering how much the political situation might damage that relationship. And I was pleased to discover that while Tom was very strong about the prisoners' 5 demands, and he was obviously not in any attitude or position to move away from those, but at the same time, that as soon as we met on a prison visit, it was clearly the family relationship that was there, and we were there as cousins, and he appreciated the visit. He made it very clear that there wasn't any question of diluting the prisoners' demands, but at the same time he appreciated the visit, and I was anxious. I wanted him to know my own attitude, that I would certainly have preferred the hunger strike not to be happening and him not to be on it. And if possible for him to get off the hunger strike, and for them all to get off the hunger strike, and to find a resolution. But at the same time, I was making it very clear to him that my relationship with him as a cousin and a friend was not dependent on what happened in relation to the political situation or the hunger strike situation. That I was still going to be there, and I was there as a friend and a cousin, and I wouldn't cease to love him as a cousin. Just because I had a different view about the hunger strike. I pointed out to him that Bishop Daly had said to me that he and Cardinal Daly and, it probably was Cardinal Lafay at that time, they would have made every effort to intervene and to encourage a solution, that if the prisoners could come off the hunger strike, that there were other ways of putting pressure on the British authorities to try and alleviate the prisoner situation, but that didn't actually work out. But at least I felt that Tom knew my position and Bishop Daly's position, and yet he also knew that it wasn't a question of saying do this or I'll cease to be concerned about you, that the family relationship and the personal relationship was still there. Remembering the sense of the hostility for us coming in, and for me coming in as a visitor into the prison, it just strikes me that we could only have a very, very tiny idea of the kind of hostility that operated within the prison at all times, the hostility between prisoners and prison officers, the brutality that existed. I mean, the images have gone around the world about the dirty protest and the blanket protest and so on, but there certainly was a high level of brutality and hostility within the relationships within the prison all the time. And I remember talking to Tom McElwee about that, and Tom made a very interesting comment to me that we tend to think of the hunger strikes as being purely related to the political issues and the 5 demands, to achieve the 5 demands. But Tom said to me that he also felt that while he was on hunger strike, it was as if he was interposing his body like a block of wood to take the pressure, to hold the pressure from coming down on his comrades in the prison. And the way he presented that was that while the hunger strike was going on, everything was frozen. It was like the Cold War situation. Everything else was frozen. While the hunger strike was going on, all the emphasis went on the hunger strike, and the brutality and the beating and the various ways in which the prison officers would have taken out their resentment on prisoners. These all ceased. So while Tom was on hunger strike, he felt that he wasn't just working for the 5 demands, but that he was actually preventing the kind of brutality that they had experienced in the prison. He was holding that off. He was interposing himself as a kind of a protective block to keep these things from happening to his friends and comrades. Just looking again here at the prison hospital, at the strange architecture, even inside what could be described as a ward, but it has the protected window of a cell, so it's both a ward and at the same time it's a cell. But also the whole architecture of the H blocks. It is not a normal type of architecture. This is an architecture that grew out of the whole horrific conflict situation, and it does strike me that the whole of the Maze prison here, the whole of the H blocks, the whole Long Kesh reality, it's like something that physically was extruded from the pain and the conflict and the hostility and the armed struggle, all these various names that we give it. It was as if it all gathered together and was extruded like a shape being extruded into a piece of plastic. That what we have here in the remnants of the architecture of the H blocks is something that in its own strange way signifies the horrific nature of the conflict and the hostility that has existed in our society. It's so strange to stand here in one of the H blocks. When we first came up from Dublin, the Irish Commission for Justice and Peace Group, we went to Hillsborough Castle. We met Michael Allison, who was the Minister for Prisons at the time, and he spread out on the floor a large plan of the H blocks, and we all got down on our knees around this plan, and we began to look at the way the H blocks were organised, the circle and then the 4 wings, and the arrangements for association of prisoners, and what the prisoners meant when they were looking for increased association and so on. And so my first contact with the H blocks was through a plan or a map of the buildings. And again, just to stand here in the reality of those buildings, and looking at the iron, I suppose they're more like gates than doors here. Looking at the shape of the building, and translating the map into reality, and realizing the efforts that had gone in to isolate prisoners, to separate Republican prisoners from Loyalist prisoners, and to break down the kind of arrangement that had existed in the earlier stage when prisoners had political status and operated more like a prisoner of war camp. And when you stand here and you look again at the physical shape of the buildings, it brings back all of that reality, and again all the tension and the hostility that would have existed within these walls. One of the things that strikes me here, just looking down along this wing, is the whole question of communication, the extraordinary efforts that prisoners went to, banging out messages on the heating pipes, shouting out messages in Irish. The quality of the Irish, I'm sure, wasn't at a very high academic standard in many cases, but the Irish language became a method of communication. And also in terms of communication with the outside world, the tiny little comms, as they called them, the communications, where they wrote in very, very tiny writing and rolled up the pieces of paper and hid them and passed them on to visitors and so on. Some of those communications are highly significant in piecing together the story of what happened here. And for instance, David Beresford, in his book 10 Men Dead, uses those communications to a large extent in putting together the messages between the IRA leadership outside the prison and the prisoners within the prison. So it's hard to imagine when you look at this building that communication could have happened at all between one end of this building and another, not to mention between this building and the outside world. And another thing that strikes me very much in this particular location is that in 1981, when we were dealing with the hunger strikes, we were never allowed into these wings or into a prison cell. Everything took place within a very controlled environment. We were taken to a very small number of places, and every contact with the prisoners and the hunger strikers was very, very carefully organized and monitored. But when I was back here in 1990 with Jerome Connolly, who was the Executive Secretary of the Justice and Peace Commission, and David Stevens and John Lampin of the Irish Council of Churches, when we came back here as an inter-church group to do a report on the prisons in 1990, the atmosphere had totally changed. And John Steele was the person in the Northern Ireland office in charge of prisons at the time, and he met us and brought us to the prisons, and he arranged that we had total access, that we were able to come onto the wings here, we were able to go into the prisoner cells and talk to both Republican prisoners and Loyalist prisoners in their own cells, and it was just such a totally different atmosphere compared to the 1981 hunger strikes. The other interesting thing I found as a Catholic priest coming in an inter-church group, that not only did that seem to make me more acceptable to the Loyalist prisoners, but strangely I was very clearly aware that it made me more acceptable to the Republican prisoners as well. And I often thought about that afterwards, and I figured that one of the reasons why that made me more acceptable as a Catholic priest speaking to the Republican prisoners was that when we were here as the Irish Commission for Justice and Peace, a body representing the Catholic Church, the Republican prisoners would have seen us in terms of the power structures of the Catholic Church and the fact that the Catholic Church was opposed to the IRA campaign of violence. Whereas when we came back in 1990 as an inter-church group, because it was an inter-church group, even the Republican prisoners didn't see me then as representing the power structures of the Catholic Church. But because we were an inter-church group, we had set aside the specific structures of any one church, and we were there together trying to address the issues as an inter-church body, and that seemed to make us much more acceptable to all the prisoners.